Eat multiple tablespoons of honey every single day for your overall health and well-being. According to Thomas DeLauer, of course, which is why we're here today again and covering more nutrition misinformation online from Thomas DeLauer. Again, I've covered Thomas's nonsense before. He doesn't quite seem to understand human nutrition science. He doesn't quite understand, not really exactly human nutrition science, although that's true, but the idea that human nutrition science, the fact that human nutrition science cannot inform upon health outcomes in human beings, long-term or even short-term, actually. They don't even give very great inferences or indications whatsoever. Of course, we'll delve into exactly why if you don't know quite yet, because you, for some reason, haven't bought my book, Contraindicated, or haven't binged my channel for some reason. Link to the book in the description below. The second edition is almost out. Go ahead and buy that one. That's out too. Help yourself, because that's really all you'll be doing if you do such a thing. So anyway, yes, this one, as you might expect, is about the benefits of honey in the human diet. Great. So I can't wait to hear what Thomas DeLauer has to say about some 28 nutrition studies, and of 5 maybe. We'll find out. And how amazing honey is because of, I don't know, a prospective cohort study or something. Anyway, instead of jumping to conclusions, let's go ahead and see what he has to say and waste no further time. Of course, just like always, subscribe to the Patreon if you haven't already to gain access to 1 week early uploads, ad-free content, uncensored content, and an exclusive Discord server for Tier 3 members. And once again, buy my book, Contraindicated. Links to both of those in the description below. So now, with that being said, let's get into position and begin this refutation.
Here's 5 reasons that honey is more than just a sweetener.
Well, no one said it was just a sweetener, Thomas. It's loaded with toxic, contraindicated carbohydrates for human consumption. And again, what is the requirement for exogenous carbohydrates in human beings, Thomas? It's 0. Even the ADA, the American Diabetes Association, recognizes that much and admits that much. Although they do jump through some mental gymnastics to, arrive at their conclusion that you should be eating 270 grams of them a day. But anyway.
Published in a Journal of Medicinal Foods that when they compared honey to sucrose and dextrose.
Okay, how did they do that? Was it a randomized controlled trial? Was it a prospective cohort study? Okay, what did they do? In fact, even in your description here, you didn't even cite the study. Let's hope that whenever we press play, he actually shows something on the screen. But let me tell you something, whether it be a randomized controlled trial, which is not controlled at all, which is precisely why I don't like the name in the first place. And also it's arguably not properly randomized either, because you need genotypically and phenotypically identical twins for it to be properly randomized in the first place, actually. So for the same reasons it's not properly controlled, it's also not properly randomized. Whether it be a randomized controlled trial or whether it be an epidemiological prospective cohort study, it doesn't matter, because they cannot inform upon long-term health outcomes in human beings because they didn't control. This is why it isn't science in the first place. Thomas, what was the sample size? What was the signal-to-noise ratio on variables X and Y? In both data sets, by the way, because they try to have a control, but it doesn't work that way because that's not how it works. But anyway, what was the status of these people? Were they overweight or obese whenever they started consuming honey? Were some of them overweight and obese? This is the problem. The way that sugar and fat and protein are metabolized by the body and processed by the body is dependent on your already current circumstances. Again, that has to do with phenotype. And genotype, actually, because your predisposition to being obese is higher or lower depending on what your genotype is. Thomas, this is ridiculous. Human nutrition science is a bunch of bread and circuses. It shouldn't be paid attention to, okay? You can perform quite great, frankly, studies in this field. You can, it's possible, but it still cannot inform upon cause and effect, and the inferences will still be quite poor as compared to the inferences that you can draw from all of the other fields of science, like comparative anatomy, observational and chemical paleoanthropology, biochemistry, exercise physiology, human physiology overall, etc., etc. Even physics, actually. So, continue.
Acutely and over a 15-day period, there was
15 days. I'm sorry. I really am sorry. I forgot to ask, how long did the study go on for? Classic question. I ask it all the time. It escaped my mind. And the one time, of course, that it escapes my mind, he brings up a study that lasted 15 days. Great, so this can inform upon health outcomes over the course of 15 days in people that are not genotypically identical or phenotypically identical to us. The studies, rather the results in such studies, are only able to be applied to the groups studied, Thomas. That's how it works. Was this study repeated in other populations? Can you answer that? And if it was, how many times? What was the sample size as well? Because we need that for the signal-to-noise ratio in the results table. If you have a low sample size, you are going to have an extremely poor and uninformative signal-to-noise ratio. This is basic statistics 101. Wow.
significantly lower glucose levels.
Define significantly. Do you mean statistically significant? What was the p-value, Thomas? Or are you just saying it as a value judgment statement? And frankly, even if it did show statistical significance, it does not necessarily represent clinical significance in the real world because your sample size was most likely low. Not to mention, once again, this study lasted 15 days. Well, great, Thomas. Now I can derive an inference as to what may happen to me, keyword may, because it leaves may not entirely on the table, if I eat just a few tablespoons of honey every single day for 15 days. Thanks. Cannot inform upon 16 days, or 17 days, or my entire life, but 15 days. Thanks. I mean, what's 15 divided by how many days I have left in my life, based on the average lifespan? Holy sh**.
There was significantly lower glucose levels in the honey.
Wow. So now what Thomas is saying is that in order to lower your glucose levels, if you have a problem with them, because that's also the caveat, do you actually have a problem with blood glucose regulation? We need to look at your fluctuations, not just the absolute level, okay? Because, see, we actually understand the Hippocratic Oath, which states that if a patient presents with no symptoms, in effect, this is how it's applied, or at least should be applied in the medical sphere, then you have a responsibility to not intervene in those circumstances. You're obligated to not intervene in those circumstances, no matter what blood tests or blood markers state. Indicate, because they don't state anything. Since we understand that oath, though, we understand that markers do not necessarily inform, hardly ever actually do they ever inform, upon your actual health status as a human being. Were these people symptomatic? Okay? Not to mention that if they were, then these results can only be applied to people with diabetes, Thomas. But putting all that aside, you're now telling us that the best way to regulate our blood glucose levels is to be consuming glucose. Are you out of your mind? Seems to be the case that whenever people consume a carnivorous diet, a properly tenured, ostensibly, properly fortified, ostensibly, carnivore diet, that their fasting blood glucose may trend upwards a little bit, as well as their HbA1c, but they have better blood glucose regulation, and they feel better than they ever have in their lives. It's a flat line of glucose, for the most part. And if they do have a genuine problem and they're not consuming any carbohydrates, guess where those carbohydrates came from? Their liver, Thomas, and so it was indicated to have been produced, and you need to find the problem, which is probably excess protein consumption in one bolus for your requirements as a human being. So anyway, let's continue with this inane nonsense, unfortunately.
So it's not just like sugar. There was a study.
It is sugar, Thomas. Thomas, it's sugar. What do you mean it's not just like sugar? Well, it has other things in it. Great, but it's sugar, Thomas. Oh my God, this is Paul Saladino bullshit. This is Saladino University here. Holy
in the Saudi Medical Journal that took a look at
who gives a okay, it took a look at 7 trials. So it was a meta-analysis of 7, well, if you say trials, they're randomized controlled trials. And we already covered the concept of randomized controlled trials at the beginning. So there's already problems with it because science is inherently reductionist, if you can once again even call this science in the first place. But let's continue.
Trials and found that honey increased HDL.
No, it didn't, because increased is a cause and effect statement. You cannot inform upon causation in the area of human nutrition science. Association does not equal causation. It was associated with an increase in HDL and a decrease in LDL. Guess the what, though, by the way, Thomas, even if it was a causal association, those markers do not inform upon heart disease risk, you imbecile. So now he's buying into the lipid heart hypothesis. It's 2025, and Thomas DeLauer's buying into this bullshit idea that cholesterol, or any of the lipoproteins, or subfraction of the lipoproteins, or any of the tags on the lipoprotein particles, ApoA, ApoB, etc., cause heart disease. If that were the case, Thomas, then why does plaque not build up in the entirety of the vascular system, and only builds up in not only one part of it, that being the arterial part of it, the oxygenated side, the high pressure side, hint hint, but also particularly in set sites in that situation, in that area, particularly the areas that experience the most turbulent blood flow, Thomas. Irrespective, by the way, of cholesterol levels. Hell. You know what is really highly associated, extremely highly associated with cardiovascular disease though? Diabetes, Thomas. And the mechanism is staring you right in the face.
Decreased LDL, decreased oxidized LDL.
Again with the decreased. Cause and effect statement, Thomas. Get these words out of your vocabulary.
And decreased triglycerides.
Wow. Once again with the decreased. Let me ask you something, Thomas. Did they do anything else? How were these people selected? What were the biases, by the way? I'm not even as concerned about those things, but when you start talking about studies, we need details. We need to see the studies. You at least need to put the study title on the screen so that we can actually look up the study and read it for ourselves. Okay, Thomas? That's part of my job here, okay? But you've given me nothing to work with here. You've given us nothing to work with here, Thomas. Seriously. What else were these people doing, by the way? And again, genotypically phenotypically identical? Not one bit. All right. Here's another problem. If they attempted to control for the concentration, the absolute amount of honey that they were told to eat, these people were told to eat, that in and of itself is a confounder because these people were different sizes. You can't give someone one glass of water that's 90 pounds and expect that to have the same effect on someone that also has that same glass of water that's 250 pounds. Broaden your horizons and stop being so myopic, Thomas. That's my advice to you.
Some mechanism there that needs a little bit of flushing out, but it's interesting.
There's no mechanism, Thomas. Was there healthy user bias involved here?
A study published in Oxidative Medicine and Cell Longevity
Cite it!
found that honey increased antioxidant.
Again with the word increased. Whatever the you're going to say afterwards, you can't say that. Was associated with an increase. And by the way, what was the average increase? What was the signal to noise ratio? X plus or minus Y. Okay. What was it? What was the standard deviation? What was the variation around the data set, Thomas? And also, what was the standard deviation and the mean for both X and Y at the outset when you measured these variables? And what was the error around the difference between the second data set and the first one if they even bothered to control and do a washout period? Thomas, do you understand science?
Activity in humans.
Okay, so what he said, sorry, the thing with Instagram Reels is I pause and then when I play, since they're really quick, you can't really hear everything that they were saying. He just said that it was associated, is what he should have said. But what he said is honey increased in this study antioxidant activity in humans. Let me tell you something. I've talked about this before with the NRF2 pathway. Just because consuming something that is considered to be an antioxidant, a plant compound, is associated with increased antioxidant activity in the body does not mean, if they are causally associated, which let's just assume for the sake of the argument that it is, that that compound is an antioxidant. In fact, with sulforaphane, it's a pro-oxidant, which is why it increases antioxidant activity in the body, Thomas. Like, you know what else stimulates the activity of NRF2? Smoking, it seems. There's great associations between those two things. We also, on a chemical basis, know what the NRF2 pathway is involved in, which gives us the greatest inference, actually, Thomas. If you inflame the body and cause oxidation, it gets activated. So that's not a win. That is your opinion. We talk a lot about the differences between opinions and facts on this channel, don't we?
It was actually increasing something called superoxide dismutase. So it wasn't
No, because increasing is a cause and effect statement. Superoxide dismutase is inherent in the name. It's implicit in the name that it's involved in, well, changing the formation of superoxides. Superoxides are a common free radical formed as the result of oxidative activity in the mitochondria. Okay. Also, not to mention, by the way, that even if honey was responsible for this, and it actually was responsible for activating antioxidant activity in the body, not because it was causing oxidation, but because there are antioxidants in honey. What else is in the honey? And can you get the same antioxidant effects, if not better, by doing something else? Like, I don't know, grounding electrically to the earth, which is what we've been doing for millions of years as a species, and what most animals do, besides the ones that are domesticated. What a shock.
As an antioxidant, it was stimulating the body to produce its own antioxidants.
Ostensibly, you just drew another causal inference, Thomas. Not to mention that even if that's the case, that does not mean that you should be eating honey and guzzling it every single day. What it means is you could potentially use it for medicinal purposes, which is exactly what I actually recommend people do if they want to use honey ever. Okay? What demographic of people were involved in this study, Thomas? Seriously.
This about honey for a while, but now there's more literature demonstrating it.
No, it didn't demonstrate anything. What you're doing is demonstrating your incompetence, though. Thank you.
That it can increase what's called adiponectin, so it can help.
No, not can. That means that it has to have been shown at least once to have an effect on something.
Regulate fat and glucose metabolism. Again,
why are you? This is what I mean by engaging in pseudo-sophistication being extremely dangerous and causing people to actually be more stupid than smart. Let's think about this on a very superficial basis. You have poor glucose metabolism. You want to find out how to deal with your glucose metabolism and get it a lot more regulated and a lot more indicated. Do you eat sugar or do you eat not sugar? I don't know. You tell me. You tell me. Tell me in the comments what you would do or what you have done if you're someone that has actually been sick, because there's a lot of people. It's why I do what I do.
We've seen this indirectly in other papers, but kind of interesting to see it directly with adiponectin.
It's interesting is just your opinion. I'm glad that you think this is interesting, but frankly, since I understand this stuff, it's not interesting to me at all.
Published in the Cochrane Library that took a look at 26 trials and demonstrated.
Wow. So now you have to look at the integrity of all 26 trials, Thomas. All the questions I've been asking about all these trials? Well, now what you have to do is you have to ask it and find them out for all of these individual 26 trials. And if you don't, then you're putting way too much faith in the authors of the meta-analysis.
Honey has powerful wound healing properties.
Those studies did not demonstrate that. It may have suggested it. You see how language is really important in the conveying of this information?
It could be because of the antimicrobial effect. It could be because of the viscosity.
It does have antimicrobial effects because we know that the compound in there, one of them, is quite literally antimicrobial. Okay, I have cleaner under the sink that's antimicrobial. Should I be eating that, Thomas? And before these strawman idiots that may or may not watch my content, a lot of them do though, by the way, before they say, well, Eddie just compared honey to cleaner, huh? No, the point is that just because something has antimicrobial properties does not mean that you should be regularly consuming it, okay? It's not how things work.
Of it, we don't really know. But again, something's happening, so honey's pretty cool in my book.
Well, thanks, Thomas, for telling us your opinion. That was your opinion based on an absolute misunderstanding of scientific inference. Statistical inference is really what we should say. Absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, let me know what you think of Thomas DeLauer. Let me know what you think of the comments I made. Tell me, don't eat honey. Don't do that. Eat a species-appropriate, species-specific diet for your species as Homo sapiens sapien, that being the flesh and associated fat of large ruminant animals, primarily with added salt to taste, added fat in the forms of butter, tallow, lard, suet, and ghee to taste, and water and salt. Transition appropriately, prudently over the course of 6 to 8 weeks, with each week upping your intake of animal products and lowering your intake of plant material, including carbohydrates. If you're thinking dairy is safe, there's a lot of dairy with carbs. Just remember that we are not exactly the most equipped to withstand the consumption of dairy as much as we are ruminant animal meat. Grass-fed if you can afford it, grain-fed if you have to buy it. Grain-fed, you can see amazing benefits from that, in my opinion. Of course, benefit, cause and effect statement. But it seems that you can still attain the same level, or at least an optimal level of benefits by consuming a carnivore diet consisting of grain-fed meat and not only grass-fed meat. So anyway, with that being said, once again, leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Leave a like, don't forget. Subscribe, don't forget. And once again, if you haven't bought my book, Contraindicated, a closer look and revision of mainstream health axioms that have perpetuated illness, disorder, and disease for over a century, go ahead and buy that book in the description below. You're missing out, guys. And also the Patreon. If you haven't subscribed to that, go ahead and do that as well. It's as low as $2 a month. Come on, guys. $2. Two! And finally, the link on the bottom of the screen. What is that link? Well, that is a link that will bring you to an amazing site with amazing products from an amazing brand known as Cerule. If you purchase product through that link, you will get a permanent discount and permanent free shipping discount as well when signing up for monthly deliveries. And if you email me behind the scenes at edgoki14@gmail.com, I can tell you how to earn those products for free, because who in their right mind wouldn't want that? So, of course, though, I wouldn't suggest buying anything that you don't really know about. So before haphazardly ordering for your own sake, go ahead and check out the video in the top right corner of the screen, the Cerule Products link, which is a complete video elucidation and explanation of what those products are, who should take them, why you should take them, when to take them, etc., etc. And I'd also further migrate to the description below to find a video between myself and Professor Bart K on these products in further detail, as well as the company of Cerule itself, which I think is incredibly important if you are considering contributing towards the company with a purchase. So, with that being said, join me next time when we react to someone else that has confirmation bias, frankly, and wants to justify their addiction to carbohydrates. So, till then.